Okay, I'd like to wait one more minute. It looks like we've got pretty close to critical mass here, but there's still folks coming into the waiting room. So Kathleen, maybe wait one more minute and then get into it.
Sounds good.
And I believe the telephone number ending in 3364, is that you, Anders? So with the person with the telephone number ending in 3364, if you could just unmute and let me know who you are, that would be great.
Johnson from Bonneville, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, welcome.
Yeah, I'm the 3364.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. For any observers who are on the Zoom call, we invite you to go to the live stream at www.rawstrategic.com/livestream. That helps me manage the Zoom a little bit easier. We are going to be having public comment today at 11:50. And for the folks who are going to be provided public comment, we will be providing you this very same Zoom link for you to join us at that time. Susan, if you could please flip to the next slide. Great. And we will share, as I mentioned there, we will share that information as we go along. So I'd like to go ahead and get started. And Kathleen, I'd like to turn it over to you for any opening remarks, and then I'll go through some Zoom logistics and review the agenda.
Well, as we start day 2, just remembering what we were able to accomplish yesterday, I want to thank the speakers from BPA and from the Department of Transportation, Washington, really opening up to how they do their business, what opportunities there are for us to look at improvements as we try to figure out how to address a really critical issue, and that is to make sure we have the adequate transmission for clean energy for the future. So I think the discussion was very honest, and appreciate everybody participating and look forward to more of the same today. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. Okay, just a few quick Zoom reminders. Please remember to keep yourself on mute by hitting that old-timey microphone on the bottom left-hand corner. Today, we are really going to be, as we were yesterday, leaning into a verbal participation. And I'm going to be asking you to raise your and lower your hand to indicate to me that you want to jump into the conversation. You can do that by using the keyboard shortcut Alt-Y. Definitely important to allow everyone the chance to speak and to listen actively to try to understand others' views. And if you need any technical assistance, please use the chat feature to send our colleague, Lauren Dennis, a note, and hopefully she can help you troubleshoot whatever Zoom malady we encounter. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk about what we're going to do today. So similar to yesterday, as Kathleen indicated, where BPA and WSDOT shared their perspective of what some of the challenges they're experiencing. Will Power from IBEW 77 is going to be talking about labor needs and shortages in the Pacific Northwest. And so he's going to share some of those perspectives, and then we're going to have a similar Q&A as we did before. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try to recreate what we did with the challenges yesterday with some of those emergent principles that we distributed via email, and many of you interacted with over the mural boards. So I'll issue instructions on how I am interested in running that session when we get to that session. So that's it in terms of introduction and agenda review. I just want to pause and make space if folks have any questions about what we're doing today, or anything else that they want to share with your colleagues here before we jump into it. Okay, so Will, I'd like to turn it over to you, and we're going to jump into the first session now.
Thank you. As I said, Will Power, IBW 77. Just everybody knows I'm a journeyman lineman, about 25 years in the trade. I represent 6 small utilities, the labor at 6 small utilities, and all of the construction linemen, line workers east of the Columbia River, North Idaho. So my presentation today is talking about the labor issues with transmission. There are some key barriers that we currently face to transmission upgrades. A little background, there's about 125,000 what we call line workers, linemen, women in the country, union and non-union total, which is not really a lot. So currently we're experiencing a labor shortage nationwide in this trade. And this is due to retirement of baby boomers and lack of large-scale investment in infrastructure historically in the energy sector. There's large investment in the 40s and the 70s, and then our opinion is basically everybody's kind of been flat. You know, if you need a project built, it gets built for need, but not a large collaborative effort nationwide to plan for the future. And that has led to this labor shortage we have now. It takes about 7,000 hours of on-the-job training in addition to classroom and controlled environment training, or basically 3.5 to 4 years to complete apprenticeships for journeyman linemen. Approximately 100 years ago, the fatality rate of line workers was 50%. 50% of the, at that time, men only went into the trade to do the work. You know, 50% survived, 50% died on the job. We've worked very diligently at the IBW since that time to get that fatality rate down. Currently, line workers are in the top 10 most dangerous jobs in the world by the Department of Labor statistics. And that is even with all our safety and all our training. We run into some problems with if we loosen the standards of the apprenticeships, try to fast track the training to create more line workers sooner. We know that what that road goes down, and that's more fatalities and more incidents and lost time accidents, damaged equipment, hold up of projects. It gets besides the human effect, there is also a huge financial effect every time we have a fatality, a large, or you know, it stops these projects. We had one last year in Central Washington where a young apprentice was killed. You know, the job was frozen by the state for over a month or more while they did their investigation. So it holds everything up as well, which costs even more money. Yeah, along with that, the shifting off of natural gas that's coming, as well as the utilization of electric vehicles, creating the extra, you know, the high demand, putting all your eggs in one basket with electricity. It's a good way to reduce our carbon footprint, but it's going to, besides the transmission work that needs to be done that we're discussing, this is going to have a effect of, rebuilding distribution and distribution overhead and underground structures and lines, as well as transformers and other equipment to every residence that is currently on natural gas or adds an electric vehicle. So you're not just doing the transmission, you're going to have to rebuild basically the whole grid from point of generation to the meter for the demand, which then it's the same men and women that are building the transmission lines that are doing the distribution lines. So you're further depleting that labor pool. Some of the fixes to this issue. I mean, we can ramp up to do this work, but some key items that would help is accelerating some of the projects or starting them sooner than later to create the work that we need to train the apprentices, because we can't train them if we don't have the work. You can't, we have controlled environment stuff. The Northwest, we have down in Astoria, Oregon, our JATC apprenticeship training center that we share with 3 other locals for the region. And we have facilities there, but that's just not the same as doing the work out in the field. And the work's so varied that you just can't simulate every situation out there. So they also kind of starting some projects sooner than later. Will labor costs are going up with the demand of labor. The rates are going up for the line workers, and so getting some of the work done sooner will actually help, mitigate that inflation of labor cost, make the projects a little bit cheaper to get done. Another thing that I keyed on yesterday was the environmental concerns. If we identify environmental concerns and plan on the mitigation efforts early, we'll create a safer work environment for these line workers. That way they don't need to deviate from their planned work to adapt and overcome the situations on the ground. Once things happen on the fly without the planning stages, we usually have serious injuries or fatalities. There's an instance in California a couple of years ago. They're heavily into environmental issues down there, and some choices were made, and the company ended up folding over a 250-foot tower with people on it, having fatalities and stuff. So, and that was directly related to workarounds of what they would normally do due to environmental factors. So in the end, they ended up doing it the way they would have done first. But just some planning in that area really helps to streamline everything. So that's about what I have. I'm open for any questions.
Great. Well, thank you. And so please go ahead and hit Alt-Y if you have questions. And then I'd also invite folks to kind of reflect in the same vein that we did yesterday about challenges and opportunities, because clearly, the things that Will laid out there pose a potential significant barrier to the work that we're potentially envisioning over the course of the next several 20, 30 years. Great. Nicholas.
Thank you. Will, I really appreciate your comments. I'm curious, does a journeyman lineman have to have a special certificate or special training to work on high tension wires versus distribution system wires? And are there any if that's true, I don't know, but if it is true, are there specialties that have acute labor shortages?
No, we say 9-volt to lightning bolt. Once you obtain a journeyman lineman ticket, as we call it, you do everything from point of generation to the meter. There's that, they do it all. So, I mean, we have other classifications, equipment operators, groundmen, laborers, and such like that. But the linemen do it all, substations, everything. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Will. Other questions or reflections on what Will shared with us all this morning?
And I could add that I was at a labor management in Portland 2 days ago, and the JATC started about 180 apprentices this year, which is a historic high for that organization. And I believe we have 322 apprentices in the Northwest. That's Washington, North Idaho, and Oregon going right now as well. So that's historic because we have more work, but and I would add, there has been some infrastructure, investment, but it's just as needed basis. If the area you need more power or down your street, added some houses, they would rebuild the line, reconductor the line, and then, affect any transmission net for the area. But they just, they've historically built for the peaks, like we just like transmission, you build for the peak load that you have, and you try to project a little bit, build it as big as you need for the next, 20 years or so, but with growth, how it is these days. and the demand, that's the big thing, is the demand that no one saw coming with the electric vehicles and the switching off of natural gas, because we have it has been incentivized in the state for 40 plus years to be on natural gas. It's pretty efficient, and switching off of that source of energy is what's causing this. So
Great, thank you, Will. So we've got several questions or comments here. I've got Kathleen, Joe, Bernard, then Glenn. So Kathleen, please.
Thanks, Will. One of the topics that you covered that is really.
Oops. Kathleen, you accidentally muted yourself. There we go.
Okay, the troubles continue. We'll see if I can keep it going here. So truly your comments about the importance of environmental considerations and the impact changes during the construction project may make on potential safety to line workers. What recommendations do you have, or do you want to think about it in terms of how we can incorporate information in our planning processes to try to not be in that position?
Well, just off the cuff, this work is, it's vehicles getting to work sites and traveling along the corridors to construct or reconstruct things. And usually it involves excavation. Sometimes there's temporary excavation when you back up, when you're pulling up lines and stuff, because the structure might not be where the line is going to end necessarily. It'll be spliced. So it's usually that's what we run into, is excavation on those sites, and access issues. Usually that causes us the biggest problems.
And do you think, just as a follow-up, is some of that by trying to meet schedules and therefore going faster, or trying to go faster?
On the environmental thing that I'm speaking to, it's not really going faster. I mean, unless the planning portion was rushed, possibly.
Okay.
Like the California incident, there was a type of animal that lived in the ground, burrows or what, and they did not want to excavate to disturb those. So the temporary anchoring system that they would have put in place to pull the wire was not used. They went with a different method, and that's what caused everything to be pulled over. Miscalculation, and from what they normally did, trying to figure it out. That's what linemen do all day. Is it's a changing world out there, and everything's not the same. But you deviate too far, and then you have accidents. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Kathleen. I've got Joe, Bernard, then Glenn. Joe, please.
Yeah, thanks, Will. I had a question about whether or not did we run into shortages, labor shortages in the Northwest during recent windstorms and such?
We have. It's when that takes. There's some other issues in there too, but we are right now. For instance, just regular work. Local 77, so the whole state has what we call standing calls, where calls that are not able to fill. Because we refer in construction side, at least, not at the utility side, direct hire, but we refer out guys as they travel around the construction line. You might go do a job in Texas if you wanted to go. You can go anywhere in the country, and which is very helpful as bigger projects are needed, where you can move the workforce to, or draw the workforce to where the demand is. But the demand is everywhere right now in this country, and we have 37 standing calls for journeyman linemen, which that's a big amount for line workers, as limited as we are. So that leads to longer outages during storms. It gets fixed, but it just takes longer, to get done. So.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Will. Bernard, and then you, Glenn. Bernard.
Thanks, and thanks a lot, Will, for your presentation. That's really enlightening. I think from this side of the ball, we tend to plan and not think about boots on the ground and actually thinking about the labor force and how much there is of it. And if I got this right, my back of the napkin math here, 7,000 hours for a journeyman is about 5 years to reach a certification for a journeyman. Is that right?
It's about 4.
4 years, 4 kids. So 4 years, and then there's 37 calls for linemen now, or journeyman linemen now, and you guys don't have the bodies to fill those roles currently.
That's correct, and we're in the construction side. The utilities are having a shortage, so what they do is if they don't train their own apprentices, or somebody leaves and that planning wise over the years for the apprentice that's journeyman leaves and go to another utility or somewhere, they rob from construction traditionally. Guys either working on, either they just straight apply there, or you're working on someone's property like a PSC property or a Vista or wherever, and then they say, hey, this guy does a really great job. You want to, they put out the posting, and the construction guy might be getting older and settling down. So we're having we have a ton of guys settling down at the utilities right now too. So, which is great for them, but for your big projects, it's not so great.
Right. And if I could just ask one last follow-on question. So kind of looking into your crystal ball, if you would, in what we're planning, or this transmission grid corridor project looks like 20 or 30 years down the line, 5 years for journeyman apprentice, assuming we have enough in the hopper going through the program now. Do you think that we would have enough labor force in 20 or 30 years to complete this project?
Without a ramping up, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Will. I've got Glenn, Julie, then Clint. Glenn, please.
Thanks, Will. Well, thanks, Rob, and then also thank you, Will, for that presentation. And I think you talked about this a little bit already, but is the labor pool kind of the same between the projects, like constructing commercial buildings and doing retrofits in the residential sector compared to this kind of more utility type work? Or are those kind of separate job areas?
Are you at? We're not part of the building trades. I don't know if that's what you're at. That work is so different. It's so not even close.
Yeah, I think that is what I was asking, is whether like the electrician who they do seem to be in short supply for like installing the circuits for electric vehicles, or even new electric heat pumps in a house that's been using natural gas for heat, and then just the overall commercial construction activity and the electrical work that's associated with all the new commercial buildings. You're saying that's a pretty different pool of workers compared to the utility work that you presented on today?
Yes. Yeah, totally. The inside wiremen, they have, I think, about an 8,000 hour apprenticeship, but what they call high voltage, we call low voltage. we have low, medium, high, extra high voltage, and so while they get into 480, and that's very dangerous voltage, that's about it for them. So and the type of work is so different. So
okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Will. Julie, and then Clint. Julie, please.
Okay, so Will, you were talking about the journeyman lineman being able to go, pretty much anywhere around the country to work, but aren't there different work roles between the states? Like, is there some variation in that training, like for Pacific Northwest linemen versus, say, down in the South, that would cause some limitations, or is that easily overcome?
It's pretty easily overcome. The only everybody has Fed OSHA. Some states don't have Fed OSHA, or they have Fed OSHA, but they don't have anything else. In Washington State, we have the WAC. We're very protective of the WAC. It's helped us have one of the safest work records around the country since its inception. So people that don't know, the WAC came before Fed OSHA. They based it on the WAC, basically. We do what, it won't affect transmission. We do hot stick, what we call hot stick. We use fiberglass sticks to manipulate the energized conductors when you change out poles and stuff. There's a big misconception that we turn the power off every time we work on it, and it's more the opposite, to keep the lights on. Because if we turned it off every time a pole need to replace or reconductors or anything, your lights would never be on. So they do what we call rubber gloving in most of the rest of the country, but there's limitations to that. If you climb a pole and work off the pole, certain voltages, you can't do that. There's a lot of limitations to that, and we see it as less. When an accident happens, it's worse when you're rubber gloving than hot sticking, but that won't affect the transmission per se, because you only hot stick or you do de-energize the transmission work that the voltages we're talking about. So,
okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Clint, please.
I was just going to reiterate with what Will was saying about difficulty with line workers, finding them, give you some numbers for a utility. We're a small utility. We have 18 line workers and 2 apprentices and 3 vacancies right now. So that's 16% vacancy in line worker. And to Glenn's comment on, while this may not be an answer to the rest of the building trades, the city also has electricians, electronic techs, radio techs, and other skilled force. And we do not have any vacancies in those trade areas. And so we're fortunate on that. Definitely a difficulty with small numbers of line workers availability right now. And yes, we'll continue growing our own, and so that we don't steal from the construction trade. I know we'll have another apprentice position open this next year, and I'm glad to say the city's has had an apprentice program approved through the state since 1958, and so it's a long-going apprentice program, and we're proud of that. So concur with Will's comments on lack of line workers right now. Thank you.
Clint, thank you. Stu, please.
Yeah, a quick question, Will. You were asked, are we going to have the workers we need in the future there? And it was no, unless we ramp up, which is also kind of yes, as long as we ramp up, right? But can you say a little more? Because I think you've got those 300 some folks who are going through the apprenticeship that the union's doing, but it sounds like that there are other ramps too. There's lots of different ways that apprentices come in. Can you sort of lay out the groundwork of all the pieces that could get ramped up that could make sure we have the people we need?
Well, each region has their own training, and it's all standardized through the IBEW. It's standardized with the same bookwork throughout the country. The on-the-job training varies, and how they do that. We do Saturday class every other Saturday during the apprenticeship process for 7 or 8 months of the year. Besides their on-the-job training, they do that on the weekends. And then we have some intensive training down in Astoria, Oregon, 10 days, a 10-day period each year. Other regions don't necessarily do that. They might rely on just the bookwork and on-the-job training. So sometimes you're not getting, we like to think we have one of the best apprenticeships in the country. There's some other, Cal, Nevada's, it's got a great apprenticeship too. Mountain States is doing pretty good. And then the East Coast, other areas kind of lack. You see that when people travel in the training. As far as other avenues, really the apprenticeship's the only path. There are some private blind schools now. It's kind of turned into a mini, like a unit. It's kind of the way college has gone, where you have organizations that make a bunch of money sending somebody through a school that's 4 months long, that kind of gives them the basics. And then some individuals think that makes them a journeyman lineman, and some don't. And there are definitely challenges I see a lot more fatalities and injuries where other companies, or I don't want to bash on the unorganized, but they put people in places they shouldn't be. For instance, we have 7 steps every 6 months. If you have 1,000 hours of on-the-job training and your grades are 80% or better in your classroom, your workbooks that you do, you get 80% or better, and they're done on time. And we have evaluations every month by the foreman and the journeyman lineman that's on the crew. At least one of them that's overseeing their training. They track all their hours. They do a report on. They have to return that in every month. If it's late, the second time it's late, the hours don't count. Very rigorous. You're indentured as an apprentice. You go where they tell you to go. It's a indentured apprenticeship. If they say go to Spokane next week and go work for contractor XYZ, you go to Spokane and work next week. And then a month later, they might say go down to Portland, Oregon, work for this contractor, because they have the type of work that you need to learn. Whatever it is. But we do that process, and they move through those 7 steps in progression. And so at 5th step, and they're making some changes with the apprenticeship. If an apprentice is excelling, they're moving that to halfway through their 4th step. They go hot, work on energized. You can work on 600 volts or less as we call a cold apprentice, but at that midway point, you then can work on the 7,000 volt, 13,000, 12,000, all up to 500,000. You can work on that energized conductors, high voltage conductors. So we see in other places they put people, kid just got out of line school, and 3 months later, hey, go up there in the air and work on that energized equipment. And that's where it goes real bad, real fast. So it's really funneling, having the work, because like I said, there's these organizations that are putting tons of kids, taking their money, putting them through the school. So we don't have a shortage of applicants to get into the apprenticeships. It's just the bottleneck is the actual work to train them, because we have our ratio of 1-to-1, 1 journeyman to 1 apprentice.
And just again, it sounds like the apprenticeship is definitely a way to go. But could a utility have an apprenticeship program within what they're doing?
Yes, many of the utilities have their apprenticeships. Because we're certified with the state of Washington. We have a certified apprenticeship, like Clint said. Richland and Vista, especially the larger utilities, have their own apprenticeship. PSC has all contractors, so they're utilizing construction members to do all their work. But your Snohomish County PUDs, Seattle City Lights, they all have state certified apprenticeships.
Got it. So there's a whole bunch so it's not just the 370 you guys got. There's a whole series of these streams of apprentices coming through.
Yeah, and just so you know, Local 77 represents not only construction, but almost all the utilities in the state, except for the Yakima Nation and up in Bonners Ferry, North Idaho. There's some pockets. There's Local 483 in Tacoma, just the city of Tacoma, and they have construction as well that we have a contract. We're with them together for our apprenticeship, but and there's a few on the coast, but basically every utility is IBW and the ones that want to and see a benefit in training their own, they have their own apprenticeship, state certified apprenticeships, which are a mirror of what we do.
Great. Thank you, Will. We have one more question, comment, and then I'm going to switch gears. Nicholas, go ahead.
Thank you. And Will, this has been extraordinarily informative. I think we all really appreciate you coming on and educating us about linemen and how you become a lineman and that sort of thing. But I am curious, previously I worked at a utility, and my recollection, it's been a while, but my recollection is that one of the challenges that the utility had, it was a rather large utility in the Pacific Northwest, that they didn't have enough journeymen. The journeymen were so busy that they had struggled to oversee the apprentices. and because they just didn't have the time, they had to focus on all the work that was in front of them. Is that a problem that you see, or is my recollection incorrect, or that sort of thing?
Yeah, there's apprentice ratio. It's 1-to-1 now. It used to be 2-to-1, 2 apprentices to 1 journeyman lineman, and that changed because they knew they're going to run out of linemen. But they kind of was under like pulling teeth because they know that if you're whatever your trade is, and if you're doing the work and training the next guy at the same time, the demand on you is a lot. And imagine doing a dangerous job and trying to train 2 apprentices, because you're trying to, it's like herding cats sometimes, or if everybody that has children, if you have one child, and like I do, you got what you got, you think you got it rough, and then you got 2 or 3 to watch at the same time while you're trying to cook dinner or do whatever. Make sure the kid doesn't put their hand on the stove. You're watching a lot more hands the more you have. So there is, it depends utilities. It might be, the growing pains too of how many journeymen you have if you can't get any more as work, try to, as you get more work. But we don't see any way around it besides, just maximizing as many apprentices as you can have on the crews legally and safely to the work you have. There's one question you had earlier popped in my head about the inside wiremen. They're going to have their own challenges because electric cars and off natural gas is going to be a higher, that's going to be a higher demand themselves. So the meter bases might not have enough capacity. 200 amp meter base, older houses, very older houses might be 100 amp meter base, and houses today's standard 200 amp meter base. You might have to go to the next class up, a 400 amp meter base, if you have an electric car and you're running your heat and you're running everything at one time. So we'll see how that challenge comes, but they'll definitely have their own, and retrofitting houses to wire up for electric chargers and stuff. You don't want anybody just grab a little bit of Romex and wire up their little home deal to plug in their car and burn their house down. So they're going to have their own work cut out for them coming up.
Great. Will, thank you so much. Appreciate it very, very much. And so my challenge to folks that are on the call on the TCWG, as we start going through the principles, in light of the conversation that we had just now, is there anything that we need to add to the principles? Is there anything that we want to add, either enhance or change for the principles as they're written, or add a new one, so that we accommodate the learning that we just did over the course of the last 40 minutes. So thank you, Will. Kathleen, anything else before we move on?
No, I do think that I haven't looked all the way through, but I do think we need to add something. So I don't know the right language about, supporting the necessary education for the workforce. I don't have the right words, but recognizing that as the need for electric power grows, the need for the workforce grows, and making sure that we have the appropriate education apprenticeship for a safe workforce.
That is some things that like coming to mind. I was going to say, the limitations that pushes your projects out 10 years to start. That's one of the barriers, and it's not every project, but getting some projects in the pipeline to go. But also a thing that when you're just talking is as we start more and more apprentices, it's subsidized. Apprentices pay 40 cents an hour for their books and such, and then the contractors and the union members themselves, actually portion of their dues goes to the apprenticeship training. But if there was some, as we ramp up, there's more cost to that. If there was state or federal funds added to, maybe I'm sure there probably is some already, but we're a nonprofit where some funds could be added to help support building out more training facilities or equipment as we grow the apprenticeships.
Great, thank you, Will. Okay, Susan, if you want to flip back on our screen share, we're just going to jump right into the principles, and we'll shoot to take a break in about 45 minutes here. Okay, so you received via email and in the mural a set of principles. We worked through the challenges yesterday, and today we're going to be working through two lists of principles. We have a list of principles for meeting near-term transmission needs, and then after our break, we'll come and we'll talk about principles that we think we've heard the TCWG talk about with regard to siting and construction of the lines. So we've recognized that there is some overlap between these two, but we want to provide a little bit of grouping here. So that's how we've chosen to split the two lists of principles up. If you could flip to the next slide for me, the mural, a screenshot of the mural is up there, and what we did in the mural, and about 10 of you were pretty active in the mural, so thank you for the folks that were able to find the time to do that. We listed the principle. We asked you to put a check mark in the second column if you think we've if we accurately captured the principle, and then the third column there was any suggestions that folks had to modify the principle to better reflect the meeting discussion. So we've taken all of the information as of about 9:15 this morning out of the mural. So we've copied and pasted it into the Word document. And so like yesterday, we're going to be working through the Word document. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be marching through each of these principles. And I'm going to be asking the following question. When you read that principle and you look at that principle, do you think it's important that we keep it? Yes, it's important we keep it. I'm sort of lukewarm about keeping that principle, or no, I don't think we should keep that principle. So that's the question I'm going to be asking you to answer. And then I'm going to be asking you to share with me and others the why or how you would improve it or why. And so I would like to hear from at least 4 of you as we go through each principle. And we're going to be trying to capture your responses in live time up on the screen. So Susan, if you could flip to the Word document, we're just going to try this out, see if it works. And if it doesn't work, or I'm not asking the right questions, or we're not getting the feedback, then I reserve the right to swap with the approaches. Okay, so the first principle that we had up there was a regional multi-state approach to sourcing renewables can allow Washington to take advantage of the cheapest energy and increase reliability due to geographic diversity. One of your colleagues provided a suggested edit, which we copied and pasted down there. That doesn't substantially change the substance of it, but provides some important clarifications there. And so what I'm asking folks, and I'm looking for at least 4 of you to comment on this, is how do you feel about this principle? Important that we keep it? You're sort of lukewarm about it, or no, you don't think we should keep it? And then tell me why you feel that way. And Susan's going to try to capture that in real time. So looking at principle number 1, yes, lukewarm, or no. So I'm looking for at least 4 of you to reflect on this. So go ahead and raise your hand and jump in. Yeah, Clint, thank you. He gets the gold star for being the first participant. Clint and then Glenn.
Yeah, so I like the comment on this as the edit. I commented on further down on other ones, and it's the transmission's not needed just for renewables, but it's for all resources. And so I would suggest editing this again just to strike the renewable portion. on it. It's to get all resources, regardless of and you can say clean resources, I don't care, but it's not just renewables.
Fantastic. Thank you, Clint. Glenn.
I think this is an important principle for us, and it, I think that we need to look beyond solving in-state obstacles or obstacles to the in-state transmission. I mean, it's important that we be able to connect new resources in Washington to loads. But it's also important that we strengthen the transmission system across the West, at working proactively with utilities and state people, all over the place. There's a really big mutual benefit that can be realized by doing that.
Great. Glenn, thank you. Anders, then Nicholas, then Katie. Anders, please.
Yeah, I agree with that last comment. I think it's an important principle. We're not an island in Washington, and the load and resource diversity is taking advantage of that over a broader footprint is going to be necessary. And then I also support the first comment about using a term like clean rather than just renewable, since the scope of what CETA allows and requires is broader.
Anders, thank you. Nicholas and Katie.
Thank you. So I agree with everything everyone said, but I would want to make sure we understand that the only way we're going to have a regional approach is if we have sufficient transmission. And the way it reads now, I'm not sure is accurate, because it says it will allow us to take advantage of less expensive resources, and absent additional transmission, I'm not sure that it will. So perhaps a nuance, but I think the point is absolutely spot on.
Great. Nicholas, thank you. Katie.
So I think I don't have a problem with renewables being in there for obvious reasons, but I think clean would be okay. I do think that the language change Glenn made from cheapest to less expensive is important, because we are not only prioritizing the cheapest, but we have other priorities here thanks to CETA. And realizing that geographic diversity is very important for the advantages that we would realize with load diversity, and what different resources can provide in different regions that Washington can't provide at certain times, which is why I think that before we commit to knowing whether how much new transmission is needed in order to realize that geographic diversity, that I think that's something that we need to study, because there are gains to be made even before new transmission is built.
Fabulous, Katie. Thank you. Stephen, please.
Yes, hi, good morning. I agree with a lot that's been said, though I'm curious, about removing the word renewable completely, because renewable and clean energy isn't necessarily interchangeable. For example, nuclear can be considered clean, but I don't think most people are going to want more nuclear power. So I'm curious. I don't want there to be a seemingly insignificant word change that could create a different conversation, because I think what we're trying to do is think about broad options and not necessarily limit the view scope.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Any other perspectives on, as Katie and Stephen just shared their perspectives on the term renewable? I'm curious to see how other folks are seeing that or thinking about that. And then, Glenn, I have a question for you. I don't know, in the development of CETA, whether you all struggled with this same characterization of how to do it and how you landed on CETA. Yeah, Lorna, please.
I just was going to say that I agree with the point that others were making initially, that it does have to be broader than renewable, and CETA certainly envisions that, and we're certainly planning on that. I think also just the intermittent nature of renewable, right? It has to be broader.
Great. And Bernard, I see your note in chat. Thank you. Stu?
Yeah, just real brief, and maybe we need to get the nuance of this offline. I think part of the reason that what we've heard is that with renewables in particular, you need that geographic diversity because the wind is always blowing somewhere. So there's a nuance in a sort of a subtle nuance here that maybe we can craft more carefully offline. So we probably need to mention both clean and renewable in talking about geographic diversity.
Great. Thank you, Stu. Glenn, any not to put you on the spot, but okay, I am going to put you on the spot. Glenn, any perspectives from your experience in development of CETA?
Well, I mean, I could go into some discussions about why the legislature chose to include both, renewables and nuclear, but it's probably a little bit off topic. And I mean, the bottom line would be, if you're trying to avoid, greenhouse gas emissions, they are equally effective at doing that. They each raise their own, other issues. But anyway, so I'm happy to talk more about that at some point. And I would reinforce what Stu said about the value proposition for robust transmission, I believe, is greater with renewables than with more dispatchable power plants, including nuclear. That if you were to build out a 100% nuclear system, you might use some of those smaller facilities and avoid a lot of transmission development, by locating them more dispersed across the landscape. But renewables have this, geographic element to them where, the wind in Wyoming is just different from the solar in Utah, and they complement each other in a way that is very meaningful if there is transmission, to kind of connect all those different nodes in the network.
Glenn, thank you. Okay, I think we've got the gist here. Any final thoughts or comments on this one? And what you all just did there is exactly what we had hoped and envisioned in doing this exercise. So I just want to reinforce awesome. And so any final thoughts or comments on principle number 1 here? Okay, so principle number 2, this one, I think we can move through pretty fast. So that little number there in parens was the number of green check marks that said, yes, we agree with this, and we don't have any, that we captured it accurately. So this was one of the higher receiving ones. And so principle number 2 is when considering the need for new transmission infrastructure, all efforts should be taken to optimize the use of existing infrastructure. So we didn't have any suggested edits to this one. And so I'm looking for maybe 1 or 2 at least people to voice yes, no, lukewarm on this one. Yeah, Lorna, please.
I mean, I just absolutely agree with it, but I guess if we wanted to add something to it, we could add that includes looking at upgrade of existing, obviously. I think it's a logical thing everyone on the phone would agree on, but we might want to just make clear that, when citing, I mean, there's almost a preference for upgrading existing as opposed to new corridors, and just recognizing how important that is.
Great. Lorna, thank you. And Anders, I see your note in chat. Thank you. Aaron, please.
Yeah, I support that last comment that Lorna just made too, with that clarification.
Great. Thank you, Anders. Aaron.
Yeah, I also want to second what Lorna just said. I think it is important that we upgrade the existing infrastructure that we already have to meet any kind of increased demand going forward. And just, as a practical standpoint, using the infrastructure we already have is going to minimize impacts on environmental concerns and siting concerns and all that. So definitely support this one.
Great, Aaron, thank you.
And sorry, Rob, can I just add one more thing?
Of course.
I just want to make sure everyone's clear, and I think that people that just talked totally get this. As a utility trying to upgrade existing infrastructure, it's sometimes harder than new corridors. In fact, we've had projects where we built new corridors because we've had such opposition to upgrades. So I think just to ground what this committee is supposed to do, I think we really need to look at making sure the policies reflect the preference, because in practice, we definitely have not found that.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lorna. I've got Kathleen, then Bernard.
Just checking in with you, Rob, since I can't see lower down the page. This is considering transmission infrastructure. Do we have a place later where we talk about other existing infrastructure like rights of way and others?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We've got, yes.
So we don't need to include anything else here that's coming later.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. Bernard?
Thank you. And yes, I agree with everything everyone else said prior to me. I do feel positive about this this number 2 here, but ownership of these changes also may be something to look at while we're developing a policy. Who is responsible for optimizing that infrastructure? Typically, the buck gets passed to the utility, but I know that they do this all the time. They're constantly optimizing their infrastructure. So what would they be doing differently than a day-to-day operation?
Interesting. I don't know if any of the utilities on the line want to reflect on what Bernard said.
Sorry, I couldn't raise my hand enough. This is Lorna. I think what you're saying is, if you look at Puget's territory, if there's a Seattle City Light transmission line that has space on it, optimizing, trying to use that space, is that kind of what you're referring to?
Go ahead, Lauren, I'm sorry.
Because in a perfect world, we try to do that, right? But it's also hard we're all load serving entities. Like in that example of Seattle City Light, has excess capacity, but they're predicting that, oh gosh, we're going to absolutely need this capacity in the future. It's hard to do that. So I think that's what you're asking about, but I agree, like it's also hard to coordinate. It's kind of the same issue Glenn was referring to, that we need a big regional planning, even on a micro level. It's hard. If that's what you're talking about, I just wanted to clarify.
It is, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Okay, so I've got, I'm going to go for 2 more comments on this one, and then in the interest of time, I'm going to flip to number 3. I've got Nicholas and then Anders. You're going to have the last word on this one. And Kathleen,
Okay.
Your hand is, I just want to make sure your hand, okay, great. Nicholas, yeah, jump in.
So I was just going to comment on the last set of comments. The other thing to remember is that the major player for transmission in the region is BPA, and they're outside of obviously the state jurisdiction. So part of the challenge is going to be working on a federal level with BPA if it is their transmission grid that needs to be expanded or somehow the capacity increased.
Thank you, Nicholas. And conveniently, we've got Anders going next. Anders?
Yeah, I would just kind of reinforce it. It probably includes several things like the regional planning organization, Northern Grid. It probably includes the utilities working well together. And then also might just add that probably a role for the transmission customers here, and with consideration of things like conditional firm service and the things we talked about yesterday.
Great. Anders,
and
thank
really
you.
clarifying what the coincident needs are on the system.
Great. Thank you. Any final thoughts on this one before we move to number 3 of 8? Okay, so number 3 here, the principle is additional transmission capacity in the east-west constrained power flow paths could allow for more power to be transmitted from the east side renewable resources to the west side load. And so we had two comments that were in the mural that I want to bring to your attention. The first is that similar to the first principle, we suggest removing renewable from the description. And there was another comment on that comment that was agreed that the lines need to transmit all resources to account for the intermittent nature of renewables. And then there was also a comment that said why we focused on east-west only, that we're also going to need some more north-south depending on where the new projects are. And so I want to invite folks to, and my staff just told me a third comment came in since we updated this one. And so yes, no, lukewarm on this one. Where do folks fall on this one? And any reflections on some of the suggested changes? Yeah, Katie, please.
I think renewable is an important word in this one because specifically looking at the latest round of IRPs coming out of utilities, it's very clear that there are renewable resources that need to come east to west to meet the need in the near term, which is what this emerging principles section is. So I think that renewable is important here.
Great, thank you. Anders, please, and I'm sorry, I lowered your hand because I thought it was from the last one. I'm sorry, Anders.
Yeah, it was from the, I had left it up before.
Oh, okay, so you don't have a comment?
And I think I went to go click to lower it right when you clicked it, I think it was
okay.
the same time. But yeah, I just support it being not just east to west, but because moving the resources will require that, but also the other directions like north-south.
Great. Kathleen, please.
I also thinking about the longer term future, which might not come for 20 years, there is the potential for ocean wind energy as well. And, I don't know where that fits if I don't know what the capacity is, but the nearer term capacity is definitely in the east, west, and north, south. So that's my comment.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Clint.
Yeah, I think like what Kathleen was mentioning, maybe it is more than just renewables, and the word clean could be used in there, and as we talked about in the first comment.
Great. Thank you, Clint and Stephen. I see your note in chat. Stu.
Sorry, I was just going to point out the comment in chat. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just thinking here as kind of that recurring theme about renewable is showing up. I'm thinking and I'm proposing that we carry the word clean and renewable anytime we've used just the word renewable on here as our default practice. And so if renewable shows up in future ones, I'm thinking that kind of as a default practice, we carry clean and renewable as part of these principles. What do folks think about that? Lorna?
Yeah, hey, just I completely agree. I'm glad you brought that up. And really, I know everyone on this call probably knows this, but where people get confused, the nature of moving electrons on a wire. If we start getting into renewable, I mean, I don't agree. I don't disagree with Katie at all that the purpose of the system of renewables, but we need to be really careful that things don't get slated that it can only move renewables, because then we're going to have a physics problem.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Lorna. Katie, any thoughts? Not to put you, no, perfect. Katie, I see you raise your hand. Katie.
Yeah, I don't think that we're making any policy claims here. I think that we are identifying a need and looking at our current resources, which include latest IRPs. And I think that we're making specific recommendations. And I think that if we generalize all of our recommendations, it won't be as clear as it could be. So I think that knowing when to use clean and when to use renewable might actually be important, because we are actually trying to make specific recommendations. And one of those should target the need that is made clear in all of the Washington utility IRPs in the latest cycle, which is that there is renewable resource to be brought to load east to west. So that would just be my recommendation. Thanks.
Great, Katie, thank you. I've got Kathleen, then Stu. Kathleen, please.
So I'd make a proposal that we say primarily for renewables and put a note in recognizing that transmission carries the power that is created by all the sources generated in the state. So that we are, because I do agree with Katie that the impetus is to connect the new generation for renewables, because it's if we weren't going towards renewables, we would have a different transmission need. So I think we need to recognize that it's primarily for that, but also recognize that it's not exclusively for that.
Great, Kathleen, thank you. Stu.
Yeah, just build on that and reiterating, I think we got enough. I think we can, the team can work on this offline, and when we have at our next meeting, we can kind of articulate something that captures, and it's a nuance, and it's a so I think if we could table the discussion and get some feedback for our next version next time.
Okay, that sounds great. Nicholas, last comment on this, and then we're going to move on to number 4.
Yeah, this is just a reaction to the question about renewables versus clean, and largely it's nuclear when we're talking about clean. One of the concerns I would have about saying, well, a utility IRP only focuses on renewables, and that's because IRPs typically look at what's known to be available, and I have no projections about the potential for new nuclear, but to the extent that it becomes available over time, it will be, if it does, it will be a resource utilities will consider. It may be too expensive, it may not be what they want to do, they choose not to for a host of different reasons. But at this point, I guess the argument that we should focus on renewables because that's what IRPs do. Well, utilities redo IRPs every 2 years, and what they say today could be changed 2 years from now. And this is more of a longer term strategy. So I think we need to be a little bit careful about focusing just on what utility IRPs say today.
Thank you, Nicholas. Okay, fabulous. Everyone, we're doing amazing. So thank you. I want to keep up. I know it's going to be hard to keep up the energy, but we only have 2 hours left. Okay, so number 4 here. So consideration should be given to building higher capacity transmission line in existing corridors, including upgrading to DC lines when appropriate. And so there was a very specific suggested edit that instead of upgrading to DC lines, that it reads, including converting or adding high voltage direct current. And then there was someone who agreed that said we need to keep the flexibility for AC depending on needs. And so same as we did before, I'd invite folks to reflect on this one. Yes, Anders, please.
Yeah, I guess as just the engineering perspective, I would caution against us picking a particular mode or technology in the principle, because it might really be case specific, but if you focus the principle on the the higher capacity part, then that kind of leaves the door open for what's the right technology for a particular application.
Got it. And I think this is what you're saying, so I just want to make sure. And I see Bernard, you gave this one a thumbs up. I think, Anders, what you're saying is that we should end the sentence where the comma is currently.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess I would say that I wondered, was just trying to get at when we do build a new line or an upgrade, like build it with some higher capacity to grow into, rather than just have it be full on day one, or is that?
Yeah, it was
part of it.
It was twofold. There was the conversation that you all had at meeting 2 around there are within existing corridors, there's the ability to, and I'm not using, Anders, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not using the right terminology here, but the gist was there may be the ability to, the weakest, the lowest voltage line in the transmission system could be upgraded to be equal so that, you know, the whole transmission line can carry the same voltage, or there's the ability to upgrade the voltage without having to add new transmission.
Yeah, I think I know what you're referring to. Yeah, so there, if we just say, yeah, the consideration should be given to building, maybe to increasing the, we could say to increasing the capacity of transmission lines in existing corridors. And then that would cover converting to DC, rebuilding to AC, rebuilding to double circuit, rebuilding to reconductoring, adding substation equipment. It would give the whole menu of options that we could then, for specific projects, the engineers could see which ones would work and be cost effective, case by case basis.
Thank you, Anders. Glenn?
Yeah, thanks. If we have, as we make this principle kind of more generic, it seems to start to blend in with number 2 above about optimizing the use of existing infrastructure. And so I don't, it may be that we should consolidate 2 and 4. If 4 stands out kind of separately, then I do think we should capture the idea of alternative technologies or approaches. I also am not a engineer, so I don't know exactly what all those might be. Like I said, I just have people coming to me touting HVDC, but there may be a value to having something in here about looking beyond the traditional methods of upgrading transmission capacity. So I don't know. I would certainly listen with our utility colleagues, transmission owners, in terms of what they think about that.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. Kathleen?
Glenn said more, he added more detail to it, but my impression was that it should be not on its own, but a subset of 2, and making sure we're not just looking at existing. I like that, the way we do things right now, but I'm open to more suggestions, but it doesn't seem to stand alone, in my opinion.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, so I think it feels like the sentiment here is that I'm hearing from folks is that, as Kathleen identified, that this one feels like it, the Venn diagram between 2 and 4 overlaps a lot. And so we should be able to simplify this list by combining the 2. Any final thoughts on this one?
Hey, Rob, this is Susan.
Yes, Susan.
I just want to note, and pardon me for interrupting on this one, but we did have a comment that I missed by Don that is speaking about the how we talk about renewable. So just wanted to note that, and I think we should probably flag it as a comment up in the previous principle.
Great. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. Susan is, as I mentioned yesterday, I have a hurt shoulder, so Susan is shouldering much of the load for me for being able to copy and paste and update the documents. So Susan, thank you. I appreciate that. Please interrupt when I miss things. Okay, I'd like to move to number 5, please. Okay, so this one was a principle based on similar to what a principle similar to some of the challenges we talked yesterday with regard to highway rights of way. So this one is a principle: highway rights of way may present opportunities for constructing new transmission lines, but a great deal of planning and preparation would be required to make this possible. And then one of the suggested edits is it could also provide for more accessible electric fuel for vehicles if lines can be taken for lower voltages. So what do folks think about this principle? Yeah, Amir, I was hoping you'd raise your hand.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should change this to transportation rights of way, because I know, railroad rights of way, I think, are another important consideration here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And then actually, a question to folks is, Glenn mentioned yesterday natural gas pipeline rights of way. Should we just say, could we make this one inclusive of that? And so just a thought, Lorna?
I just have concerns about putting that in here because then we need to worry about the current, having it grounded. We have to worry about cathodic protection. And even if it's not, I can just tell you from experience, even if we can ground it and cathodic protection is not an issue at all, it's really hard to convince the public of that. So just the idea of co-locating an electric line with a fuel line gets hard.
Okay, fair enough.
It's so hard. It's just, it's just really hard to convince people. It's just, it sounds like a scary thing. No.
Yeah, I hear you. I hadn't thought about that, so thank you, Lorna. I have Nicholas and Amir.
Yeah, I was going to probably bring up the same point, but I was going to ask the military representative, about the potential for bad actors if you co-locate like that. And so just want to get their perspective before we go down that path, but maybe we've already answered this question.
Hey,
yes,
and I want to be really clear too, just because I saw what you wrote, just so we don't get carried away. Co-locating like underground next to underground. Obviously you can share a corridor with an overhead line and an underground fuel pipeline. We do that everywhere. So I just want to be really clear here. It's just co-locating underground, like adjacent to it.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And so I think we're not going to include, let's just wipe that from our collective memories. Amir?
Yeah, so this kind of flows out of comments that Lorna made about existing infrastructure and and Glenn's comments about existing corridors. But I'm thinking that we capture in here somehow that where property rights or permitting rights already exist, those represent the preferred options. I guess it's in the same vein as existing corridors, because even under scenarios where you can't use existing infrastructure. So if modification or redesign is necessary, the fact that there's already a corridor there presumably makes it an easier prospect than a new alignment.
Got it. And then Amir, I had a little audio glitch. So you broke up for me for the first like 10 sentences there. Can you look at the screen there, what Susan captured, and make sure that we captured that accurately? So I don't know if anyone else had the same audio glitch that I did.
Yeah, so maybe with the first sentence, existing alignments where facilities exist, are preferred.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Amir. I appreciate it. Lorna, do you have a hand up again?
No, sorry. I just need to put it down. Sorry.
No problem. I call those legacy hands. Okay. Any other thoughts on this one here?
This is Anders. I'll just add one other thought that about co-locating pipelines and transmission that if we had that event a few years ago where there was the catastrophic pipeline failure in Canada, and that's I don't think there was any malicious action, but it's just something that can happen. So if there is kind of the too big to fail problem that we worry about generally as planners, that if we concentrate all of our infrastructure into a really small geographic area, something either intentional or unintentional can take everything out at once and make the system less resilient.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Anders. And Don, we see your note in chat, so we will capture that. I have Brendan and then Lorna, and then I'm going to move on to number 6 after these 2 comments. Brendan.
Okay, just toss it in one more comment on this pipeline route concept. So I've seen the reverse where pipeline companies try to follow electric transmission line route, and that runs into problems sometimes with topography, because an electric line can deal with elevation gain or loss much more easily. A pipeline's got to have a more flat route. But the reverse, the reverse might work. A pipeline route has to be cleared so that they can do visual inspection. So it's not unreasonable to keep that in there as an idea.
Great, thank you, Brendan. Lorna.
I was just going to say, maybe we just want to be big picture that, a fundamental tenet of land use, right, is to concentrate your utilities in one corridor to the extent that you can, just with the caveat that you always need to think about interplay and interaction. And, with the comment that BPA made about the Canada example, I mean, you can also have control zone issues, right, with car accidents. So I think generally maybe just agreeing, like, let's concentrate utility corridors and use them to the maximum extent we can, but just, be aware of the interplay.
Great. Lorna, thank you. I saw some nodding heads on that as well. Okay, any last thoughts on number 5 here? So we got 3 left before we take a break. And so I'm not saying that so that we rush to the next 3, but I just want folks to know that one is coming.
Sorry, I promise I will keep my mouth shut for a while.
No, wonderful.
I just want to re-emphasize, an issue near and dear to my heart is just what I last said. I mean, we really do get stuck having to do brand new corridors because you get people that, will make a lot out of the interplay also, right? So I think we just do need to emphasize that where possible, not only do we want to upgrade existing lines and we want to have a policy that makes that an easier path, but we also want a policy that makes it an easier path to use a current utility corridor. And I just say that because I know it seems obvious, but like upgrading existing lines, you actually can run into more trouble co-locating in an existing corridor, just because when people are looking at opposing things, they'll look at any possible issue there, right? So that's a whole nother topic that they can explore.
Great, Lorna, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to number 6 here. So number 6 reads, energy storage can play a significant role in increasing the grid's capacity to handle variable renewable energy sources like wind and solar. And so what do folks think about this one? Yeah, Anders, please. Yeah, Anders, jump in.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think it's going to be necessary to have more storage in some form as you go to a larger share of variable resources.
Great.
So, yeah,
thank you, Anders.
Glenn.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the statement, but I do wonder about its relevance in this work. If it is relevant, then it seems to me it falls into that category of let's do everything we can to avoid the need for transmission, additional transmission. So things like energy storage could help with that. So I would suggest either, not including it and perhaps saying more in the, use existing system more efficiently principle, or if we're going to keep this principle, tie that in, say that the reason why we're interested, we're saying something about energy storage or demand response more broadly is because it would help us avoid or reduce the amount of additional transmission that will be needed.
Got it. Thank you, Glenn. And so it was awesome. I saw hands shoot up when you said that comment. So I'm very curious. Anders, then Nicholas, and Lorna. Anders?
Yeah, I think it's good to clarify. My response to Glenn's comment is that the amount of energy storage we have and the amount of transmission we need might be related. And the amount of storage we have might impact how we can get greater utilization out of the existing transmission.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anders. Nicholas, then Lorna?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, I completely agree with Glenn, but I would say that the storage also helps reduce or helps address peak needs, because if you don't, if you have the ability to take power out of storage rather than out of the distribution, or the transmission system, that's a direct reduction in the amount of transmission needed. I almost think that we should rewrite, if we're going to keep it, and I'm happy with it going away, but if we're going to keep it, we should say energy storage can reduce the amount of transmission that's needed to handle both the variable renewable resources and system capacity needs, because it does both those things.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. I've got Lorna, then Kathleen. Lorna.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, I think, really thinking of green hydrogen as the example, right? And thinking of Eastern, a Wyoming wind farm that also is making green hydrogen when they don't need the power and the wind's blowing, right? So I just wanted to make sure with energy storage, we're thinking of it broad enough. I think you can define green hydrogen as another way to store energy, but I think the alternative clean fuels, again, I think we're really trying to get people oriented with what we're going to need for this green economy and provide the most flexibility. So I think it's just making sure it's clear that, think of all the raw earth minerals needed to build out, if that's all going to be batteries. And I think when energy storage, they think about batteries only. So that's why I just want to make sure we're thinking broadly enough, because I think clean fuels absolutely have a role to help shape the renewables.
Great, Lorna, thank you. Kathleen.
I like that. I think I'll take one of Lorna's comments from earlier and see, can we take a step up and talk about, instead of starting with energy storage, that to look for ways to provide more reliability and consistency in the transmission system. And it would include all types of energy storage, and and we could list a few, as well as and I know that demand response isn't going to be at the level necessarily as the energy storage, but I also think it's good to mention here. So but I think taking it that step up and saying ways to just provide more storage and reliability, I don't know the right words there, so.
Okay. We can work on the specific language maybe offline. Any final thoughts on this one? Okay, a couple more and we'll take a break. I'm deeply appreciative of folks' stamina here. I know that we've been going for a solid 90 minutes, but I'd like to get through these and then we can take a break. So number 7 here was geographic diversity in renewable energy generation sources can help avoid widespread outages. The suggested edit here was down below there. Geographic diversity in renewable energy generation sources can help avoid building and maintaining renewable resources to be held in reserve for reliability purposes. I don't know who put that suggested edit in there. Whomever did, it's perfect, Glenn, come clean. Do you want to explain why you were thinking about why you thought it was important to recast it this way? And then I'll see what other folks' comments and thoughts are.
Yeah, I don't know, that avoiding widespread outages was not really a term that I felt like was on point. You know, as I see it, the value of the geographic diversity of renewables is that in the aggregate, they provide more reliability and a lower requirement for reserves than if you are, you know, using only one type of renewable located in one spot. So it's, you know, I can see the connection to widespread outages, but that widespread outages is like way off at the end of the range of possible outcomes, and way before that is just, you know, how many of those do we need to build? And if we, you know, have a diverse portfolio compared to overly concentrated portfolio.
Perfect. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that. I see Stu's comment in the chat there that that feels as if this now may be duplicative with some of the changes we made to number, I believe, number 1 above. Lorna, thoughts on this one?
Maybe this is obvious, Glenn. I just want to make sure. I think what you're talking about is, you know, Wyoming wind, for example, blows in the winter more. So having some Wyoming wind in addition to Eastern Washington wind that blows in the summer, right? I think that's what you're referring to, because I admit I was a little confused at first, thinking that at first with the word geographic that, you know, having a renewable source up north helps if you have one down south in terms of constraints on the transmission. So I may have been overthinking it, but I think you mean having a diverse weather sampling of where the renewables are, right?
That's what I was thinking of when I read the original statement. But I mean, I can also see that that way of looking at it, that you know, if you were able to put renewables, you know, disperse them within a utility service area, then that's going to help with reliability. I would think.
Well, the only thing I was going to say, and I should let BPA talk because they're way smarter about it than me. I think if you're claiming that geographic diversity of wind in a service territory is going to help, I think wind integration is a whole nother field unto itself. So I think that, I don't know, BPA can comment. I think there's I follow what you're saying, Glenn. I hesitate to think that there's a big advantage for the second reason, but BPA can speak up.
Yeah, I mean, if there is, it'd probably be more, you know, like say solar in the distribution system, and if it were, you know, deployed in a way that it still works with, I don't know, even then it doesn't really avoid outages. It might help people deal with outages when they occur. So to me, it really is more about that, pairing up Wyoming wind with Utah solar and Washington hydro, and the blend is better than any one of them on their own in terms of reliability.
Great. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Glenn. And Rob, I just want to let you know that I see your comment in the chat, and we can bring that into the notes here. I've got Anders and then Joe.
Yeah, maybe wherever we decide we want to put this, maybe having both geographic and fuel diversity, because I think like Glenn's last sentence summed it up. The way they all work together is better than alone, especially for resource adequacy.
Great. Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, I think what we were kind of trying to get at with this was this complementary combination of solar versus wind, at the right times. We're getting, the higher winds from Montana or Wyoming at times when, and then during the times wind is potentially not blowing, it's maybe coming from California. So I think there was the idea was to sort of highlight maybe the complementary aspect of that. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Great. Any final thoughts on this one?
I'll just say that I think this principle makes sense in the context that Joe provided, but I am a little skeptical of it making sense in the document if we're talking about all other types of fuels that provide reliability, as that seems a little bit off topic.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so as a facilitator, it's usually not becoming of me to tell you that I've lied, but I've now lied to you. I'm not going to get through this. I think we should take a break now. I know that I need one. And so if I need one, I'm thinking that others might need one as well. So what I'd like to propose, it's 10:40 now. We're going to take a 10-minute break, come back at 10:50. We'll finish this list, ask what's missing, and then we'll jump into the other list of principles. I think the timing is going to work out okay. We have fewer principles to get through in the second half. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. I'm going to ask Susan if you could please put up the PowerPoint slide that's got a reminder that we're going to be back at 10:50. And then for the folks who are interested in providing public comment, the slide that we have up on here is going to have the Zoom logistics and telephone numbers for folks to join us at around 11:45 for public comment. And so that's for the folks that are on the live stream. So 10-minute break. We're going to come back at 10:50. We're going to finish this list and start working our way through the next list. I'm deeply appreciative of everyone's participation in the last hour and 45 minutes. Kathleen, anything else before we go to break?
I was just going to mention something to Susan, so people can leave.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to take a break. Be back at 10:50. You can feel free to leave yourself logged into Zoom so we don't have to muck with the waiting room again. So please be back in front of your computers at 10:50.
Thanks, Susan. I just wanted to make sure when I read Rob's comment, I thought it should go in the storage piece. And it ended up under the next piece. So I think he was talking about, okay.
Yeah, I thought I lost my place where I was in there.
No, no, you were working and typing so fast. I was like, so yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. See you in a few.
Alrighty.
Just giving everybody a 2-minute warning. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Okay, everybody, we're about 1 minute out here, so I ask that you start finding your way back to your Zoom screens. Glenn, I see that you maybe changed locations from where you were yesterday. No, maybe I'm. It really throws me for a loop when people change. Maybe I'm just remembering different.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel pretty stuck in this spot.
Okay, everybody, please find your way back to the Zoom screen. If you could either flip your video on, give me a thumbs up or a clap or something to let me know you're back, that would be great. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Will. Hi, Clint. Hi, Brendan. Hi, Kathleen. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, Anders. Nicholas, welcome back. Okay, so everybody, here's what the plan is. We've got exactly 59 minutes before public comment, and we're gonna use every one of those precious seconds working our way through the principles. We've got one left in this section. Then we're gonna make the call to see if anything is missing. There's a couple of suggestions that folks had with regard to potential missing principles, and we want to get to those. And then we're going to get to the 5 principles that we started with for citing. Okay, so again, I just want to recognize and laud everyone's participation up to this point, and so we're hoping for same level and depth of participation as before. Okay, so principle number 8 here is we had no additional comments provided in the mural, and we had 7 folks who indicated that they really felt we captured this one accurately. And so the principle is formalized regional interstate coordination groups are key to effective transmission planning. And so what do folks think about this one? Thank you, Glenn. I see the thumbs up there. Anyone want to voice opinion on this one? I'm looking maybe 1 or 2 folks. Even if you're supportive, why you're supportive.
I'm supportive of this one.
Thank you, Katie.
I can say why. You know,
yeah, Glenn, please.
It is this opportunity to become more proactive get away from kind of piecemeal planning, and to capture the mutual benefit between states that can be realized with more comprehensive perspective on planning.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. I want to hear one other person's voice here on this one. If we have someone who's willing to jump in. Yeah, Stephen, please.
Hi, I think it could be somewhat appropriate to include tribes in this as well, because there's large swaths of tribal land, reservation land that could potentially be impacted, and tribes are sovereign governments, and so should be treated and respected as such.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Okay, any final thoughts on this one here? Yeah, Kathleen, please.
I think we had a really robust conversation, and for the life of me, you worked us so hard this morning. I can't remember if it was yesterday or today, where we talked about the interregional coordination. So I think you just wore us out.
It was yesterday, yeah.
So I don't know if there's some information that we can bring forward from that conversation, but I think there was quite a robust conversation in support of this yesterday.
Okay, that sounds great, Kathleen. Thank you. Okay, so there were a couple of folks we asked in the mural, excuse me, we asked in the mural for folks to reflect if there's anything from that list of principles that might be missing. We had a couple of folks put comments in the mural. I don't exactly recall who they were, but if you were the person that added that first one, Washington Utilities should be exploring solutions to transmission underutilization, both in future IRP efforts and upcoming resource acquisition decisions. If you were the brave soul that put that in the mural, I'm asking you to take credit for it and then tell us why you think this one is important to be added.
I don't know if I'm a brave soul, but it was me.
Great,
I also
Katie, thank you.
Made a similar recommendation yesterday when we were talking about what was the challenges. And so here, similar to the correction I made yesterday, I think I'd like to revise this and say that the strategy for addressing near-term need, which is what we're talking about, is broader than I have here. And that would be to address transmission underutilization. And then there would be sub-strategies. So I identified one of them here, which would be for Washington Utilities to explore solutions to transmission underutilization, both in their future IRP efforts and in upcoming resource acquisition decisions, which is largely a topic covered yesterday. And then another thing that we covered yesterday with BPA was, well, it was a recommendation I made that BPA explore power flow based methods for system-wide scheduling. And so, yeah, you could just pull basically the recommendations I made yesterday as being opportunities for near-term efficiencies to be gained.
Great, Katie, thank you. And you are a brave soul for suggesting it. What do folks think about this one? So as Katie said, suggesting a broader principle about addressing near-term needs. And then having these as kind of the supporting text around it. Are folks comfortable with us trying to craft a principle reflective of that? And if so, or if not, or if you're lukewarm on it, why? So what happened over the break? All right, perfect. Stephen, I think your hand is up from the previous comment. So Stephen, if you've got a new comment, go ahead and jump in. If not, I'll lower your hand.
Oh, you can lower my hand. I can always come up with a comment.
No, if you have a comment, now that you're off of mute,
sure.
Tell us what you think, and then Nicholas.
Yeah, I'm generally supportive of that change, not the change, the suggestion. I think, again, it's about trying to look at broader perspectives, but also, keeping things a little more open-minded than sort of what the status quo has been, particularly in I mean, not so much power transmission, but just power utilization and everything and the need for the power. And I think that sort of expands the group think on that.
Great, Stephen, thank you. Nicholas.
So can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, great. So I'm a bit lukewarm on this one for a couple of reasons. One, there's often a disconnect between who owns the transmission and the utility. And so a utility won't necessarily have good perspective or knowledge about how utilized a transmission system is that they're using to serve load. So I'm not sure how they would achieve, that. And I also would point out that, oftentimes utilities, their effort is to figure out how to serve their load at peak. And if you do that, and if your peak load is substantially higher than your average load, you're always going to have a degree of underutilization for most of the time. And because you have to have that extra resources for when things get really cold or really hot. And so while I think it's great to figure out ways to maximize utilization, the idea that we're going to be able to greatly increase the day-to-day use of transmission, I think may be there, but only in a limited fashion.
Okay, Nicholas, thank you. What do folks think about that?
If we have anyone from BPA here, or people, BPA did share some figures that made clear how underutilized the system is, and I think that this recommendation is just calling back on what we heard yesterday from BPA, and so yeah, I think that was discussed at length yesterday.
This is Anders from BPA. I think if we think about like potentially controllable loads like vehicle electrification that could be added, I think what that chart showed is that that a lot of the year, but not quite all the year, we have some space on the existing infrastructure. So if we could add resources and loads with some flexibility about like when they would charge and discharge, we might be able to fit some of that in. But if we grow the peaks, then we're probably going to need the upgrades, because we have to make sure we can reliably serve the peaks. So maybe if we have loads that can fill in those valleys, or that might be where the opportunity would be more.
Great, Anders, thank you. I've got Clint and Will. Clint.
I struggle with this one. If we're trying to increase utilization of transmission that causes additional losses, I'm not in favor of that. To me, we should be utilizing I agree, utilize our transmission as efficient as possible, but we shouldn't be increasing the utilization of a transmission path just because it's underutilized, and that such that it causes additional losses, system losses. And so to me, I think this gets back to just maximizing the use of our resources rather than trying to increase underutilization. I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Clint. Will, please.
I want to add a piece on this when we talk about underutilization, and if we're going to not build some transmission lines and try to utilize it more. Well, some of the other utilities, they're all different sizes, all have different revenue, amounts of revenue or ability to invest in renewables and clean energy. So you're still going to have some utilities that can invest in that, and they're going to need this higher load. So you're going to have that flexibility to where you can't have the investment in clean and renewable to get that to the end user that they might not have the ability to build out the clean energy or renewable energy.
Great. Well, thank you. I've got Katie, then Kathleen.
Thanks, Rob. I just wanted to stress that my recommendation is really a shift in thinking on the way we model things and the methods we use. So it would be more of an exploratory effort. Sorry for the 8-month-old noise. And it wouldn't be like a targeted recommendation at this point. It would be something for utilities and BPA to explore further in the way that they model things.
Okay, great. Thank you, Katie. I'm going to come to Kathleen next. And Katie, what I'd like to propose maybe just as a point of helping us move forward, maybe we can work with you to help kind of craft specific language that we can always come back and revisit as a group. That would be great, because I think that would help. I think we're now getting the perspectives and reacting to specific recommendations might be a little bit more productive at this point. Kathleen?
Yeah, I agree with that. I liked what I heard about looking at future load that's going to be added and incentivizing it where possible, like the electric vehicles, to use at an underutilized time. I mean, wrong words again, but I do think there's a concept here, and it also goes to the regional future planning, where instead of looking at our little piece that as just one separate piece, to look at the bigger picture and try to figure out how to maximize use of the underutilized transmission system. So
great. Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, so we're going to move on. We've got about 40 minutes left here, and we've got about 5 principles on the next list, plus whatever's missing. So I'd like to move on to the next set of principles. The next set of principles were, as I mentioned before, we split them up in near-term needs, and then a set of emerging principles having to do with siting, permitting, and constructing transmission upgrades. And again, the numbers that are in parens are the numbers of folks who looked at it that thought that we accurately captured it. And so we tended to do a little bit, have a little bit of higher numbers on these than others. So even if you totally agree with it, if there's a lull in the conversation, I want to hear why folks agree with the principle, because that context is important for us to capture. So the first one here was planning of new or upgraded transmission infrastructure should be initiated as soon as possible. I mean, I think Will in his earlier presentation mentioned this as a recommendation that might get at some of the challenges with the labor force. So what do folks think about this one? If you totally agree with it, let us know why. Lukewarm or not, or not aligned with your thinking, please let us know why as well. Yeah, great. Stephen.
Hey, thank you. This is going to be a common theme with a lot of my comments, but especially with the planning phase of any sort of development project, the earlier that you reach out to tribes and initiate actual meaningful consultation, I think the easier it is for everyone in the long run, especially on transmission projects that can take up to a decade. We want to make sure that all the proper groups are working with the appropriate tribal communities and the tribal governments in an active way, not just trying to check a box and move on. Now that gets particularly tricky when you're dealing with, maybe multiple states, possibly even Canada, but that is something that does need to be considered in every aspect. And just because you reach out to a tribe and the tribe doesn't respond within whatever your arbitrary allotted period is, doesn't mean that a tribal government does not have a concern. I mean, I myself review on average 300 projects a week. My staff reviews about 4,000 projects a year. We have a lot going on, and we're trying to protect a 13,000 year connection to this land. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands the not just the legal responsibilities of reaching out to tribes, but also understand that much like everyone, we have a lot of work to do, not all the resources that we would like. But the earlier that we can be actively involved, the better.
Stephen, thank you. Okay, other thoughts on this one? Yeah, Nicholas, please.
So I apologize. I hope I'm not monopolizing the conversation, but I guess I completely agree with the planning requirements, but I would say that I would point out that there's a lot of public policies that are happening right now and they're under development. And until those get sorted, it's going to be a challenge to know, the amount of resources, the amount of transmission resources that will be needed in order to meet the need. So I guess it's a balance between figuring out what's needed now versus what you need to wait for just a little bit more understanding of where public policy is driving utilities to go and the public to go.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Other thoughts on this one? Okay, so we're going to move on to number 2 here. Siting and construction should be conducted with the utmost respect for cultural needs, values, and resource protection. Tribal consultation should be performed throughout all phases of transmission upgrades, from early planning to construction. This is something, Stephen, that you just brought up during the previous section and the previous one, and I know that Commissioner Miller and you and others have brought this up at previous meetings. I don't know, maybe Steve, if I could just ask you kind of your reflection on this one, and if you think that this is worded correctly, and then I'll see what other folks think.
Sure. Shane, thank you. And I realize it seems redundant to what I just said, but I think from a practical standpoint, siting and construction and planning are 2 different things, and they trigger very different types of permits. They could potentially trigger different types of notifications, and so that's why it's important to reiterate. Sorry, my dog just hit my laptop and closed everything. That's why the camera's off, is I'm getting attacked by a vicious dog.
Excuse me, but can we see your dog?
Oh, of course. This is Thor.
There's Thor.
Yes, he's a 7-month-old Australian cattle dog who doesn't understand who I'm talking to because he can't hear anyone, so it must be him.
Perfect.
But yeah, like I was saying, it seems redundant, but they're 2 different processes, and because they trigger different notifications, different response windows, we want to make sure that the the proper opportunity is given to tribes at every stage. So just because you notified a tribe during the planning stage, and maybe even the tribe, you consulted with the tribe provided information, you include that in the planning, then when you move on to the siting and the construction, things could have changed from the planning, because obviously, that's what you plan for. So your ultimate siting and construction ideas could be different. You want to make sure that you re-engage with the tribes to make sure that there's still that understanding of what it is that you're trying to do. Because again, when it comes particularly to cultural resources, it's all about location, scope of work, and permitting and review. And that's it. Those are the three key things that we look at every time. And the only way that we can really do that is make sure that we're aware of what's going on.
Great, Stephen, thank you. Dawn, please jump in.
Yeah, I agree with Stephen. I do want to also point out some requirements that are currently in the statute around permitting. If there's a discovery of the requirement that all construction stop and the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation is contacted for permitting. And moving forward, archaeological surveys may be required. But one of the things that we're looking at in planning under the Growth Management Act is having local governments and permitting agencies have policies that address inadvertent discovery plans. So, when an industry considers, where are they going to place siting, agree with Steve, obviously, that early contact with the affected tribe is important, but also thinking about, the costs of construction stopping if something were to be discovered on that site. And so having a plan, or at least, contacting the department to determine, what occurs when something is discovered, but also way even before that, in the business plan, having an idea that an inadvertent discovery plan would be good to include in the costs of building, not only new sites, but obviously new transmission corridors or upgrading transmission corridors. Because there will be sites in current transmission corridors that were not considered when they were originally built. So when you start upgrading, SEPA doesn't always cover, the requirements of, I think we were able to rewrite the WACs back when they revised SEPA last time. But unless you're following those WACs pretty closely, stopping construction is not really a good option for industry to take. So I just want people to think about, what does an inadvertent discovery plan look like? And the plan should be written with the tribe so that so notice and who gets notice and what will occur when that discovery is made. I'm going on and on. You don't have to write all of this down necessarily, but trying to capture that if you could.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate it. Other thoughts on this principle? Okay, so moving on to principle number 3 in this section, very similar language construction for the first part of it. Siting and construction should be conducted with the utmost respect for environmental concerns. Second sentence here is siting should be prioritized in areas that have the least impact on threatened and endangered species and their habitat. And then Lauren, I see your suggestion in the chat, so we'll capture that. So what do folks think about this one? Any thoughts? Yeah, Don. Unless that was your hand left up from before.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was my old hand.
The old legacy hand. Okay, perfect. Okay, thoughts on this one? Yeah, Brendan, please. And then Brendan, Stephen, and then Bernard.
I mean, you've got the opening sentence, which talks about environmental concerns, and then we go into detail on a specific one. So is this intended to capture broadly all environmental concerns, or do we want this just to be about wildlife? Side note, I missed a little bit of what Stephen and Don were saying because I just heard a bald eagle out my window and I needed to go out and look at it.
Bald eagle, dogs, 8-month-olds. Man, I'll tell you, it's amazing that folks are able to so much more interesting stuff. So Brendan, I think this was written with the idea of it being broader. That's what the first sentence reads, and I think the second part was a little bit more specificity. And so Lauren suggested another part of this would be thinking about wildfire risk. Are there other aspects in your mind, if we were going to begin putting more specificity in here, that you think are important to carry?
I think it's more that I'm supporting the category broadly.
Okay.
And don't want to dilute the broad category as we start to list specifics.
Okay, got it. Great, thank you.
So including but not limited to that type of concept.
Got it. Great, thank you. Stephen, then Bernard. Stephen.
Yes, thank you. So one, I like the broad concept there, and I do think that it is worth putting the wildfires in there because that is obviously something that should be considered, and it's it's an environmental impact. But I think another thing, and this will be somewhat tied to number 4 here, but I've been involved in the cultural resources for 16 years. I helped run the tribe's environmental department for about a year. I'm concerned with there being some misconceptions about why it's important to protect endangered species, endangered plants. The presentation earlier, and not to belittle the death of anyone, but to say that these deaths occurred because you're trying to avoid the den of this animal shows poor planning, and not an issue on the process of trying to protect in the environment or animals. And I think that goes back to, we need companies, especially utility companies that are rather large entities that get their way more often than not, to understand that this is a way of doing business. It's a way of thinking about our connection to the environment. So if you need to do a project and it's going to impact an endangered species, don't cut corners, don't do anything that's going to cause any potential safety issues. There's ways that you can figure things out without trying to rush things forward. I'm not saying that's what happened at all. I don't know the details of what I was told, but I know that's a slippery slope to start thinking, because I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, and it's easy for environmental concerns and cultural concerns to sort of get pushed down to being blamed for all sorts of problems, when the whole reason why these laws and policies exist is to protect things for everyone, whether or not you believe it or not. It's important. It doesn't matter that these laws and everything exist for their protection, and we just want to make sure that, I want to make sure that that is clearly understood.
Great. Stephen, thank you. Bernard, please.
Hi, thanks, Rob. So as we talk about siting and construction, I know that we don't necessarily know exactly where these lines are going to go. There's conversations about abutting against major causeways, joining with existing utility lines. We don't know where those are going to go. As we talk about siting these areas, when they do come in contact with federal land, it is important that those are also taken into consideration as well. So when we talk everywhere, we talk about tribal land, and everywhere we talk about other easements, please keep in mind that there are military installations and federally owned military lands that do spread across the state, east to west, north and south. They're kind of dotted across the landscape. And especially when we have standoff distances from our facilities or from our land, that those are just taken into consideration. I would be remiss if I didn't just at least mention that. I'm sure it would be on someone's mind, but I just want to do my due diligence and mention that.
Great, Bernard, thank you. Kim provided that comment, similar comment via email to us yesterday, and I copied and pasted that into the mural. Okay, perfect. And so Glenn, I see your comment in the chat. I'm going to just take a quick step back and say that clearly one of the next steps is going to be for us to take all of the feedback and thinking that we've all done over the past 48 hours and iterating these. And so, as you have thoughts on how to modify the language, just like Glenn did, please either feel free to put them in the chat and we will copy them into here as well. Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left here, and we've got about 3 left that we want to get through. So I think we're doing just about perfect for time here. So the 4th one here was any efforts to expedite environmental review must preserve current requirements for public involvement and transparency. I think there was one edit, and Glenn, I believe it was yours, and we've got it captured in B there that I think more closely reflects what the intent was. The edit was existing review processes reflect important values concerning public involvement and transparency that must be protected in any efforts to expedite permitting, siting, or construction. I think the intent was that be the point, that it wasn't just the environmental review aspect, but it was any type of review that happened must maintain the public involvement and transparency piece. Glenn, is there anything that you want to add to the to your point? And then Stephen, I'll come to you.
I think my main concern with the original statement was the idea of preserving current requirements. I'm not sure that the current requirements are what need to be preserved or protected. In some cases, I think people feel like those are inadequate, and there are others who see them as excessive. And so I didn't really see a principle that I wanted to support of locking in what the current requirements are. And so I tried to rephrase it as acknowledging a shared value of public involvement and transparency, and establishing as a principle that that those values be protected in any efforts that might be made to expedite the permitting, siting, et cetera, of transmission resources.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that. Stephen, please.
Yes, and I want to say I agree with what Glenn just said. And just to sort of tie this back to what I said before, and I know I keep saying a lot of the same things over and over, but you know, it bears repeating. And one of the things that particularly stood out to me, and Don had mentioned this earlier, I was involved in the working group that was working with ecology to make modifications to the SEPA process like 6 years ago. And there was so much pushback on some of the things that we were trying to do to protect cultural resources and the environment, because again, those sort of things are often considered to be a burden or just an unneeded cost to any project, whether it's, you know, a big transmission line corridor upgrade, update, construction of a new one, or whether it's just like a small substation build. The existing laws out there and policies from the state level down to various cities are improving, but it's still by and large not given the same weight as other things. And I understand it's because this is, a money-driven economy. This is something that, we need to do this. There's lots of good, valid reasons why people want to move these things forward faster, but it's always environmental concerns. It's always cultural concerns that are considered cut in a streamlining process. There needs to be some way to look at the entire process and not just, these two components that are always getting reduced. And again, the other thing to add, when we talk about, public involvement and transparency, remember, tribes are not the public. We are sovereign governments. Federally recognized tribes are sovereign governments, and we need to be treated as such. So when there's opportunity for public comment, public review, we can comment on that, but we are not the public. You want to reach out to us the way that you would any other government or state agency. I just want to make sure that those points are somewhat clear, but I do like the suggestion overall because it triggers these conversations.
Great, Stephen, thank you. Erin, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with everything that Glenn and Stephen have mentioned so far, but also point out, with Glenn's point where we're kind of putting the focus on the values that are a part of the existing review process, I want to make sure too that we don't end up adopting some sort of public process that's less stringent than what is currently required. Glenn talked about the point about how, some industries feel like what the current process is probably too much. And I know a lot of folks on my side of things from the environmental groups and the public perspective might feel like it's not enough. But it is definitely at least the middle ground. And we definitely don't want to be seeing it, any less public involvement than what's available now.
Great, Erin, thank you. Great, Erin, thank you. Any other thoughts? Yes, Brendan, please.
Yeah. By the way, Stephen, appreciated your contribution to the SEPA rulemaking a few years back. So your thoughts were helpful in that process.
Thank you.
The idea of getting public involvement and commenting during a process often ends up being sort of hit or miss in spite of best intentions. You have certain processes, often more planning type processes, that often really struggle to get, that maybe have huge impact, that have very little public attention because for whatever reason it doesn't present a threat or some kind of compelling idea that causes people to be involved. And then occasionally a particular project will come along that gets an outsized amount of public interest. So somewhere in there, it's really important to preserve the principle, but it would be great to find a way to, like Glenn was saying, to something better. Not just the status quo. Preserve the idea of public involvement, but what could be better.
Great. Brendan, thank you. I've got two more comments here. I've got Julie and then Aaron, and then in the interest of time, I want to move on to the next one. So Julie, please.
I'm just wondering, I feel like the common theme we're kind of discussing is that each sort of representative wants to make sure that their interests are notified. Is there any sort of a list, sort of like a checklist or contacts of, you know, state, federal, tribe, city, county, you know, all these jurisdictions, military, railroad, that you do need to contact for all of these things? You know, some of it may not be an awareness of those processes, but I just wonder, you know, taking a way back step of those lists of who you do need to reach out to get comment, to get notified and include in the process.
Thank you, Julie. Aaron, last comment on this one?
Yeah, I think this just kind of piggybacks off of what the last two folks have mentioned, that, you know, one issue that we often see is that the public notice regarding the start of the comment process is often the first time a lot of people hear about these projects. And so that kind of creates this mad scramble to understand what it is and what could the impacts be, and then provide meaningful public comment. And so, you know, if FSEC can, you know, build in some sort of notice process on its website or wherever, where it just says, hey, here are some projects that are currently being considered now, that it won't be such a surprise to folks when that comment period opens up.
Great, Aaron, thank you. Okay, so we've got two more that we want to get through in about 15 minutes here. And so the next one, this one came up at the end of the meeting on meeting number 2. I'm sorry, I believe at the end of meeting number 1, where we started talking about equity. And so we took those comments from the end of meeting 1 and we crafted it into this principle. Siting and construction of new or upgraded transmission infrastructure should address social equity concerns and be guided by the goal of maximizing distribution of benefits across all populations while minimizing impacts to disadvantaged or vulnerable communities. And then the one suggested edit that we got via the mural exercise was also need to consider affordability impacts to disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. And so similar to what we've done before, what do folks think about this one? So I just want to hear voices here. Even if you're in support of this one, tell me why. Yeah, Muriel, please.
Rob, this is in line with with CETA, I think, with a broader goal of an equitable transition to 100% clean and more renewable in the state. And I think that is what underlines a lot of the processes, including what like why this work group is being formed. I think it's kind of vague, but it puts the consideration out there. Should address social equity concerns, be guided by the goal of maximizing distribution of benefits. And I think that it kind of speaks to applying an equity lens to all of the substantive processes of making kind of new and upgraded transmission happen, including decision-making processes, if that's captured.
Great.
It could speak more to our embedding a process for ensuring that that these concerns are addressed, and that benefits are identified and distributed, and as our communities' specific vulnerabilities. But if it preserves space for that process, then I think that That's a helpful add, and appreciate whoever put that in.
Great, Mariel. Thank you. I've got Amir, then Lorna.
Yeah, hi. I think for state agencies in particular, I think that it's appropriate to include this in light of the HEAL Act, which compels or provides an expectation for state agencies to align our business practices along these lines. And that's the Healthy Environment for All Act. HEAL, I think, is the acronym that's used.
Great, Amir. Thank you. Lorna.
I think I'm not sure how to say this, but I think that the thought about addressing social equity concerns is such an important one, as everyone I think can agree on this call, right? Because you don't want the communities with the least voice to have the biggest impacts, right? So I think the flip side of what that point is saying is that you don't want the communities with the largest voice to kind of, it's I don't know how to say it. You don't want the people that can afford, I mean, BPA can talk to this, the people that can afford all these lawyers to oppose stuff, to move stuff over to where it impacts other people more. And that's why I'm just talking about affordability impacts. You also just don't want to have those people with more resources make things so expensive in a way that costs is hurting the disadvantaged, vulnerable people as well.
Great, Lorna, thank you. Okay, other thoughts on this one?
Can I just, this is Stephen, just one quick thing. I want to thank Lorna for what she just said. I think that's a good reminder to think about the impacts, the interstate system had on these same communities, tribal communities, African-American communities, Chinese, Japanese communities, all these other communities that, historically have been underrepresented in the area. These large infrastructure sort of projects can have a huge adverse effect on them. So I think it's great that this is being talked about and considered in here. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so we've got about 8 minutes left here before we go to public comment. So I'd like to go to the last one here. This one here, we put this one in here before we heard from Will this morning. So we were just forecasting a little bit. And so it feels to me as if this one could probably be serve to be updated some in light of what we heard. And so that's where I want to start with this one. I want yes, no, lukewarm on this one. I want to hear what folks think the actual principle should be. Where we started was ideally transmission construction work is done through employment of unionized skilled workers. I believe either Susan or somebody in the chat or in the murals suggested workforce limitations as a current challenge with an opportunity to incentivize expansion of apprenticeship, help to fund costs for these programs and training facilities as a potential. But I want to hear what folks think, what the actual principle needs to be, and then what aspects of it we want to emphasize. I don't know, Will, if I could just put you on the spot. I saw that you turned your camera on, so I'm going to take that as a signal that it's okay to put you on the spot.
I'm still thinking.
Okay, so I will take you off the spot. So what do folks think? Any suggestions on what the principle around this one could or should be?
I'm back on the spot. One of the things we deal with in any of the skilled labor trades is there was the push for decades to go to college. And so that's hurt the trades as far as an avenue for people to get into great paying jobs with great benefits, good, living wage jobs and for their families. So, I mean, these opportunities are great. With that said, I don't know how to say it. If there's funding opportunities for the apprenticeship, that's one of the possible barriers. Scholarships or that can help these kids during their apprenticeships or get into the apprenticeships.
Perfect. Thank you, Will. Before I go to you, Glenn, Susan, what I'd like to do is, I know this is going to be disorienting to folks, but I'd like you to switch to the slide that's got the Zoom information for the public comment. So it allows people in the live stream to get off the live stream and into the Zoom. So if you could please put that slide up that's got the instructions for how to do it. And then Lauren, please don't let people in from the waiting room until we're ready, but just let them hang in the waiting room. And then if you could send them a chat message to let them know that we'll let them in when we're ready, that would be great. And trust Susan that she's taking notes on what you're saying. You're just not going to be able to see it. Glenn?
Yeah, I don't have a specific phrase in mind to suggest, but I do think that the principal needs to include the kind of the need for to ensure in a comprehensive way a skilled, compensated workforce that can do these transmission and distribution upgrades. That's a key resource that our success will stumble over that if it's not addressed. Exactly how it's addressed, I don't know, but it seems like it's originally it was phrased more as let's try to use union labor where as much as possible, and it's really bigger than that. It's these apprentice programs, I don't know, just the need to address comprehensively the supply of skilled workers for these projects.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Glenn. Other comments or thoughts? Kathleen, I see the comment that you put in there about the notion of safety being an important aspect of the principle. Other thoughts on what's important to carrying the principle in light of the conversation we had several hours ago at the outset of the meeting on labor?
I don't know if it fits in this narrative, but there is no discrimination in access to the apprenticeship program. It's straight up interviews. The pay is the same. If you're an apprentice at different steps or you're a journeyman lineman, there's no difference in gender or color or any, there's no differentiation in the wage. The wage is in a contract and that's what it pays. no matter what you do, if you're on that project. So if you're groundman or operator or lineman, whatever, they're just set. We also have partnered with the Yakima Nation isn't union, but their apprentices do utilize our facilities and our training. So
perfect. Thank you, Will. We've got about 3 minutes left here. And so Will, do you mind if we work with you over the course of the next several weeks to kind of get some proposed language down on this one? But what I'm hearing is that that the nature of this needs to be broader than just the use of union labor, to include, incentivizing participation in the apprenticeship, the safety aspect, the support aspect. And so I'm hearing that that's a pretty strong sentiment here.
Along as some assistance with messaging about apprenticeships, get the word out.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've got about 2 minutes left here. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to do two things. I wanted to get a little bit of feedback about the the use of mural and this 2-day as opposed to 1 day. Because if folks are, I know from the facilitator's perspective, having 2 days is much easier on us. And I know it's perhaps a little less convenient on the scheduling side of it, but allows us to modify approach and everything and allows us to be fresher during the meetings themselves. So I'd love to get any feedback from folks. Do you like this 2-day as opposed to 1 day? Feel free to put it in the chat, let me know. And then I'm also seeking feedback on the mural, because I'm thinking that we could use much the same process we did getting ready for this meeting. Once we're able to iterate the principles, we can put them out there on mural and allow folks to come in and offer comments asynchronously. And so I'm seeing a fan of the 2-day. Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So Kathleen, we've got one person in the waiting room that's prepared to offer comments. So what's going to happen, it's going to be a little jarring. We're going to let the person in, and then I'm going to switch the security settings on Zoom. So you're not going to be allowed to unmute yourself or change your videos or anything like that. And then what's going to happen is once we let that person in, Kathleen, I'm going to invite her to unmute herself and then provide the public comment. It looks like we've got a couple of folks. Okay, does that work for everyone? Okay, so before you let folks in, let me change the security settings here. Okay, you can go ahead and let folks in. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, we have hit the point in the meeting where we are going to go to public comment. It looks like I may have 2 individuals who have joined the meeting that are interested in providing public comment. I see Danny has come in, and I see that James has come in. And so we've got asked that folks limit their comments to 2 minutes. What's going to happen is I'm going to invite you to unmute. And Danny, I'm going to come to you first, and then James, I'm going to come to you. You're going to unmute, and then if you want to just verify your audio is working, that would be great. And then I will let you know when you hit your 2 minutes. So Danny, I'm going to come to you first.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Danny.
Excellent. Hello, my name is Danny Madrone. I am the Pacific Northwest Policy Manager for the American Farmland Trust. Our mission is to protect farmland, keep farmers on the land, and promote sound farming practices. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I appreciate the work that you're doing to wrestle with some very challenging issues. There are quite a few processes taking place in the state around the siting of energy. And one thing that I've noticed in these processes is that agriculture doesn't seem to be included in stakeholder advisory groups. And I think this is going to lead to gaps in understanding around issues of land use and our food systems. My request to you is that at a future meeting, you include an opportunity to learn about the agricultural needs of Washington and protections of the Growth Management Act. I recently listened in on an FSAC meeting in Oregon where they invited their state experts on the agricultural economy and farmland preservation to provide education on the opportunities, threats, needs, and their statewide land use planning system. An opportunity like that to inform your process and decision-making could be very valuable. I also want to note that the work on transmission corridors precedes the upcoming work for the least conflict process in the Columbia Basin, which is when WSU will be coordinating a stakeholder engagement process to see where there is least likely to be conflict in siting solar energy. We advocated for this process, and we believe that this will be a valuable step towards navigating these issues. My hope is that the transmission corridor work group will inform the process for new transmission lines, which can be informed by the mapping work to take place in the near future. In the San Joaquin Valley, the American Farmland Trust was involved in a similar lease conflict process. I also wanted to note our follow-up research in that region on the land and water strategy. This research looked at areas of fertile soil compared to water scarcity, which further informs land use decisions in that region. I would love to see something like this carried out in the Columbia Basin with the inclusion of the needs for salmon recovery. Thank you so much. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, would like me to provide resources, or would like to collaborate. I can be reached at dmadrone@farmland.org.
Danny, thank you. And we have your email address as you emailed our public mailbox. So Danny, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Okay, James, you're up next. So you should have received a note to unmute yourself. So go ahead and we'll start the timer once we verify we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear, James. So jump right in.
Okay, thank you. This is Jim Thornton, public interest person, but also representing a client who's considering a very significant investment in transmission in the state of Washington. So just a couple of notes. One is in your first policy, you had in parens multi-state. I think you should actually delete that and just keep it regional, because I feel that there's not enough consideration of resources in British Columbia, which I've actually worked on several wind projects in British Columbia. And considering the new Infrastructure Act, I think it's section 40105, specifically states looking at renewable resources and increased transmission from British Columbia. And from all the sessions I've listened to and read about, I think the opportunity with resources in British Columbia is not getting enough discussion. So that's my primary concern that I just wanted to express and get on the record.
Great, Jim. Thank you very much. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to provide comments. Okay, I do not see anybody else that is on the Zoom here that I recognize every other name. So Kathleen, I think we are through the public comment period. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just talk about what I anticipate happening over the course of the next several weeks leading up to our next meeting. And then I'm going to provide space for folks for any final comments. And then Kathleen, I'm going to come to you to close us out right at the top of the hour. Does that work? Oh, wait, and I have to change all the security settings back so folks can participate here. 1 second. Okay, I think we should have changed all the security settings. So does that work, Kathleen? Okay, perfect. Okay, so looking forward, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a request from us to look at changing the meeting 4 date from February 2nd to February 9 and 10. So we're looking to move it 1 week later. We got notification that there are a couple of members that have standing meetings the first week. And so we're interested in trying to, given that we've got enough lead time, to try to accommodate the standing meetings that folks have. So we are going to propose moving 1 week forward for all of the remaining meetings, and then we're going to go to this 2-day, 3-hour format. And we're going to do that scheduling here right away. Second thing you can expect to happen is expect to get an email from us probably right before the holidays in the next several weeks that's inviting you to engage via the mural on some of the iterated principles. We're hoping to do some of that work in between now and the next meeting. And then the next thing you can expect for the fourth meeting is we're going to begin on the fourth meeting talking about outcome number 3 in our charter, which was a sense of the opportunities to expedite the environmental review. And the way that we're thinking about entering into that conversation is by the same structure that we've taken so far, where we talk about what some of the challenges are and what some of the opportunities are. But we're going to be changing the focus to be reflective of what that outcome looks like, what that outcome is, which is the expedited environmental review. So that's what you can expect between now and February. I'm going to see if folks have any other comments, any other thoughts that they want to share. Please just feel free to raise your hand or jump into the conversation, and then Kathleen, I'll come to you to close this out. Okay, Kathleen, over to you. We'll end 1 minute early.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank everybody. This was an intense couple of days, and I am glad we did it over 2 different days, because we certainly would have been worn out in one. But I appreciate the content, the willingness for people to discuss, put issues on the table, and put forward some great thoughts on our foundational work here on principles and opportunities, and look forward to having more work together in the future. I know it's hard to do this somewhat remotely, but I do think that we have developed a good working relationship amongst all of us, and thank Rob and Susan for their facilitation as we move forward. But again, thanks for being present during our discussions and participation, and happy holidays to everybody.
Great. Thanks, everyone.